You know, there's a lot of work to be done on farms. If you're out there plowing or you're out there with a hoe doing some weeding, there's always something to be done on the farm. But sometimes that work can be done on the porch, such as sorting seeds, picking them over, getting them ready to sow in the ground. Sometimes we do some shelling of some peas up here on the porch, snapping beans for supper, or we might be working on a quilt with some friends. And those times when we're able to be on the porch and be working with our hands, it's mighty fun to be able to tell stories while we're doing that. So this story I'm about here to tell y'all is it's actually, I heard this tale from Ms. Annette Bruce, and I wanted to go ahead and share that tale with you. So before I tell that tale, I wanted to tell you about one more chore that we do on the porch from time to time, and that's doing some carding. Now, carding is where you take your fiber, such as your wool or your cotton, and you take some of that wool and you load it up on what we call carders. And they're like two wooden paddles that have wire hooks on them. And so that way when you put your fiber on there, you can use the other card to kind of make a motion that will get all of your fibers to lay in one way. So that way when you go to make your roll eggs, to do your spinning of your fiber to make some yarn, it'll work out real well, and all of those fibers will be in one direction. So when you do your carding, it sounds a little like this. So once there was a woman who lived on her own on a little farm not too far away from here. And since she lived by herself, she had to work very hard. She liked her work, though, and she worked so hard and saved money so good that she was pert nigh rich from it. Now, you'd never hardly know it, though, because she was so careful with her money. She didn't like to show out or nothing. She kept all her spare gold coins in an old sack hid up near the chimney. Now, after working hard all day tending crops and keeping critters, she'd sit in her little cabin, rocking in a chair and carding her wool and cotton. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch went the cards. That way she always had fiber to spin into thread or yarn to make whatever clothes she needed or wanted to sell in town. Now, like I said, this woman saved money real good, and she was careful not to spend it for nothing she didn't have to. She wouldn't even buy a clock. But truth be told, she didn't need one. She could tell the time of day just fine by the shadows of the sun, and at night she had that figured out too. After dark, she'd sit there just carding her fiber, scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, and directly she'd let out a yawn. Now, when she yawned 3 times, she figured it was time to go to sleep until the roosters woke her up the next morning. Now, one luxury the woman would spend her money on was her favorite thing to eat, dried smoked mullet. A mullet is a kind of fish people catch around here in the rivers, and since it was dried and smoked, it would keep for a long while without going bad. She'd buy her mullet from the same store where she sold her crops and yarn and eggs and such. Now, one day she went to the store, and the storekeeper told her that the price for her smoked mullet had gone up 5 cents a pound. She says, "No, I'm not spending my money on something that high. That's foolish." And even though she loved mullet, so she turned to leave. The storekeeper hated to miss a sale, though. Now, wait just a minute. I've got this big old mullet here. I don't know what happened to it, but somehow one of its eyes got knocked clean off. For whatever reason, nobody else wants to buy it. Now, if you want it, I'll let you have it for half price. The woman couldn't turn down a bargain like that. She bought the mullet and headed home, the whole time thinking about it, licking her lips and saying, "Oh, One Eye, you look mighty good." When she got home, she hung it up next to the chimney, near where she kept her money hid. Then, night after night, when she was done rocking back and forth and carding her fiber, scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, and had yawned 3 times, she'd get up with her carving knife and have a chunk of her favorite fish before going to bed. That way, she'd always have something to look forward to at the end of the day. Now, about this time, there was a gang of thieves holed up hiding from the law over in Gumroot Swamp. You know where Gumroot Swamp is, right? Yeah, the leader of this no-good gang got in a fight a long time ago and got one of his eyes clean knocked out. So he was also called Old One Eye. One of the gang has snuck up to the store to try to steal some victuals and heard people talking about the woman and how rich they thought she was. He went back and told his boss, who came up with a plan to steal that woman's gold. One night they went to the woman's farm and hid out behind some palmetto bushes and get the layout of the land. They couldn't hardly see anything, though, since it was so dark. So Old One Eye told one of his gang to go spy on the woman. "When she goes to bed, come back and let us know, so we can surprise her and take all her gold." Now, the robber went slowly over to the cabin and looked for somewhere to peek in. He finally found a place where the mud chinking had fallen out between 2 logs, right next to the chimney where that old mullet was hanging. He stooped down and looked in, and there was the woman just carding away. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. She yawned once, then looked over at the mullet, not realizing she was looking dead at the spying robber, too. "That's one! Directly when 2 more come, I'll get my knife and start cutting," she said. That robber was sure she was talking to him. He jumped up and ran back to the palmettos where the rest of the gang were hiding. "Let's get out of here! That woman is a witch. She looked straight through that wall and said, 'That's one come. When 2 more come, I'm getting my knife and start cutting.'" The gang leader, Old One Eye, wasn't having none of that superstitious nonsense. "That's nothing but a pop-eyed idea. You just got scared of nothing." Old One Eye motioned to another robber. "You, go over there, and when she goes to bed, come back and let us know when we can surprise her and steal her gold." The other robber went over and started walking around the cabin. After a bit, he found the same hole next to the fireplace. He looked in. She was still carding away. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. And she let out another yawn. "That's the second one. When 1 more come, I'll get my knife and start cutting." That robber jumped up higher than the first and barely touched the ground as he ran back to the rest of the gang. "Let's get from around here. She's a witch for sure. She looked straight through the wall and said I'm the second one, and when 1 more comes, she was getting her knife to start cutting." Old One Eye himself stood up. "You know, sometimes I'm ashamed to be associated with you yellow-bellied snakes. Reckon I'll have to go see when she goes to bed myself. Just remember who did all the hard work when comes time to divvy up the gold." With that, he walked over to the cabin, found the same hole next to the chimney, and put his one good eye up to look through it. He saw the woman still rocking away, carding her fiber. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Just then, the woman yawned the 3rd time. Her favorite part of the day was here. Time for some dried, smoked mullet. She stood up quick from her chair with her big carving knife in her hand and walked right towards that hole that the robber chief was spying from. "That's 3. Now it's time to carve a big chunk out of Old One Eye." You'd have thought that robber had been shot out of a cannon, how fast he made his tracks. When the gang got back to Gumroot Swamp, they barely slowed down to break camp. They made off as quick as they could for parts unknown and have never been around here since. The woman had no idea what good she'd done by ridding the county of a bad gang of thieves. In fact, as far as I know, she's still living at her farm, working hard all day and carding fiber at night. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch, waiting on her favorite time of day. Now that you've heard Old One-Eye, I hope you enjoyed it too. It might even inspire you to tell stories with your friends, because stories can be fun and relaxing, or help you understand parts about the world or yourself in ways that you didn't think of before. So I hope that you can be a little creative and come up with some stories of your own, or tell some stories that you already know.